Well, as we get back into the full swing of things after the holiday break, we talk about one of the hottest teams in the NHL, who are the pretenders or the contenders in the Eastern Conference, as well as more issues north of the border here on Locked On NHL.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Locked On NHL. I am your host, the insider of the insiders, Tyler Kuehl, and beside me, as always, the host of Locked On Leafs, Mike Distefano. Mike, first of all, how was your weekend? You have a happy New Year weekend there?
Yeah, it wasn't bad. I was able to get out of quarantine from my COVID with the new shortened timelines and guidelines, I guess. So I didn't go anywhere, but I was able to, leave my room and spend time with my family. But, we were able to have a nice dinner and then just kind of watch the various countdown shows that were going on. And then at midnight, nice little cheers with the fam. Down the hatch went a little bit of champagne and probably hit the pillow by 12:04.
Oh, that sounds glorious. I decided to make myself suffer. I watched the University of Michigan Georgia game as a Wolverines
Oof.
fan.
Oof.
And yeah, that was a day. And hey, you know what? They had a good year. First time in the college football playoff. Those kids had no idea what they were doing. Georgia makes it every other year that Bama doesn't make it. But then now Bama and Georgia get to play each other. So the entire southeast part of this country that I live in is probably all just happy and fondling over themselves.
Yeah, that's gonna be a fun game. But hey, at least you're not a Notre Dame fan.
Oh my gosh. I'll go talk to my neighbor about that. He's probably having a blast right now. Mike, we got a lot to get to today, a lot to dive into here. Looking at the Eastern Conference stuff, we'll be talking about the pretenders and the contenders right now as we kind of creep towards the halfway mark. And we're, like you mentioned, you just came out of quarantine yourself. Well, there's obviously some COVID issues up in Canada that are starting to affect the NHL schedule, but we're going to start things off today. I really wanted to mention this because I myself am enthralled by the saga of success, despite how mediocre this team may look on paper. The Pittsburgh Penguins, Mike. This team has won 8 straight games, and they're still fourth in the Metropolitan Division. That just shows you how poor they started. But somehow, some way with this team, whenever 87's in the lineup, this team finds ways to win hockey games and now are back in the playoff picture.
Yeah, I'm curious. I thought this was gonna be they take a step back as well. I kind of had that thought. Clearly, I was wrong. And a big reason for that is because I didn't think Tristan Jarry was going to turn into a Vezina caliber goaltender. And I think that's been a big part of it. I mean, yeah, sure, Sidney Crosby, he's Sidney Crosby. He's still a top 10 player in the world. But let's not mince words about that, despite being so old. But look, they also have some other great players like Brian Rust, who's now back and a hat trick the other night, 5-point effort.
Yeah.
Jake Guentzel can score at will. I mean, they've got some really solid players, and they just keep playing well. They've got depth. Evan Rodriguez is having himself a career year. He also had a hat trick in the same game. Did you see that game? 8-5 Pittsburgh over San Jose. It was 6-1 after the first. And then I look at the score again later on, and it's 6-5. I'm like, what the hell? And then it ends in a 5-4 win for Pittsburgh. I'm like, what happened?
Well, for those that have watched San Jose this year, I mean, it's crazy. They're an above 500 team, but they're currently sitting tied for 6th going into Monday night's action when I last checked in the Pacific Division, because that's getting pretty tight. Obviously, a lot of teams have various games, but San Jose's played pretty tight hockey for the majority of the year. They've kind of had to, given their goaltending situation over there, defensively at least, but they still have Carlson, Burns, Vlasic, what have you. So they have some good veteran presence back there. I'm going to chalk that one up to the fact that a lot of these teams had played in about 11, 12 days. It's almost like we're restarting the season again. But you mentioned Evan Rodriguez. And the crazy part is that you mentioned a career year. His best season, looking back to his time in Buffalo, his last full season there, he had 29 points. He has 26 right now in 31 games. I mean, in his time in Buffalo, everyone always knew him as this great face-off specialist, this guy that could be the key to your depth centerman or your bottom six or whatever. And all of a sudden, he's looking like one of the best players on this team, which, mind you, still has not seen Evgeny Malkin this entire season.
Yeah, which is insane. Now you're going to add Geno Malkin to this squad, and who knows what they can accomplish. And it's funny because Evan Rodriguez was part of the Kasperi Kapanen deal that sent
Yes.
Kapanen to the back to Pittsburgh last summer, and he came over as a pending UFA. Toronto really wanted to sign him, and it's been a couple of years that they've been looking to try and bring this guy in to be like that perfect fourth line center, like you said. I didn't know this is what he had in him, and when you're kind of thrust into a position up into a top six the way that he has, it's incredible that he's been able to run with it and really take control, take advantage of this opportunity. And there seems to be a lot of guys who are doing that in Pittsburgh this year. I think this is a legit team. I think we're going to go through like contenders and pretenders in our next segment. But like when it comes to the Pittsburgh Penguins, considering that they've been so shorthanded, the amount of man games that they've lost as well, not just due to COVID, but also due to injury. I mean, Guentzel missed a lot of time. Russ has missed a lot of time. Crosby's missed
Carter.
a lot of time. Jeff Carter, like you said, we haven't had a single game yet where Geno Malkin's played for this club. So the amount of man games that they lost, the fact that they're still so much in the hunt and they're getting the solid goaltending, I think this team's the real deal.
You mentioned Tristan Jarry because that one was a big one for me because the way he played in the playoffs last year, I mean, geez, Pat McAfee was losing his mind over Tristan Jarry. Like that is how widespread, how bad he was playing in the playoffs last year.
He's brutal.
And but unfortunately, it was like, all right, what else do we got? Because they'd already gotten rid of Matt Murray, and they were kind of saying, well, Casey DeSmith's the backup, and they really don't have much of the cap space. Even though Ronnie Hextall and Brian Burke have always said that as long as 87, 71 on our roster, we're going to go for it. They kept it with Tristan Jarry, and now he has a sub 2 goals against average and a .932 save percentage with 3 shutouts. I mean, I remember I saw him come up to Wilkes-Barre, and I'm like, okay, this guy has potential to be an every NHL goaltender, but he's never going to pass Matt Murray. And then he has an all-star caliber start a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, got injured, so he didn't play. But I'm just saying to myself, this guy has it to be a starting goaltender. And once again, we'll mention this kind of when we get into our next segment here, but does he have what it takes to be that goaltender come in the springtime? Because that's where goaltenders really make their cash.
Yeah, totally. You're right. So like we can't anoint him as like the GOAT in Pittsburgh.
He ain't no Tom Barrasso, children, just because he wears 35.
I mean, he's not Tom Barrasso. Like, I mean, he's not even Marc-Andre Fleury yet. I mean, the guy's had very inconsistent start to his career. Kind of almost not even above Bobrovsky, but in the vein of where it's like good year, bad year. Now he's having a good year, so it's like, can he fix that consistency and can that help? But when I look at the Pittsburgh Penguins and I look at this long term view, I think this is almost like their year where it's their final year to push it, like with this core, with this nucleus. Just taking a look at cap friendly, the guys who are up for contract extension at the end of the year. Brian Rust is a UFA. Zach Aston Reese, UFA. They've got Evan Rodriguez as a UFA, only making $1 million. You got to think that number is going to go up after the season that he's having. Sam Lafferty, who may not be expensive, but he's going to be a UFA. Chris Letang. Who else we got up here? Casey DeSmith, so they'll have to find a backup as well. And then obviously Jeff Carter's a UFA. And then if I'm not mistaken, so is Geno Malkin. So this is going to be an interesting offseason for the Pittsburgh Penguins. And if they can try and just have one final run before they have to make some difficult decisions, I think that would be pretty incredible for the city of Pittsburgh and that organization.
They found ways to do this before too. Like, remember when Jake Guentzel came in on his ELC and everyone thought, I'm like, who's this Jake Guentzel kid? And all of a sudden he's really stepped up, and Teddy Blueger's filled third round pick. But I remember I think it was just how he just kind of burst on there during those cup years. And it's one of those things where it's like they find ways to develop players, and that's in the salary cap era, especially the fact that it's not going to go up really that much in the forthcoming seasons. You need to find ways to have guys that are making 900 or less to find ways to have them produce. And Guentzel's one of those guys, and Blueger's one of those guys. And now bringing Rodriguez in the fold, this team has found a way to do it for the last now. What are we talking? This is 15 seasons now in a row that the Penguins are going to be making the playoffs if they can hold on. Knock on wood. By the way,
they've been doing this for 15 years, though. Like realistically, you talk about Guentzel making waves and and Rodriguez making waves. I mean, think about all of the guys who have made money thanks to Malkin and Crosby. I mean, Connor Sheary, how much does he
Yep.
have to thank Malkin and
Nick
Crosby for his
Bonino,
careers? Bonino had himself a pretty good year the one season that he was in Pittsburgh. I mean, Pascal Dupuis and
James Neal. James Neal's
James
another one.
Neal, a couple of 40-goal seasons. Like, there's so many guys that they've just been able to filter through on the wings, and they just keep having success. And it's because they have two of the best to ever do it down the middle, and they just make plays. They make guys around them better. And there's the proof is in the pudding
Yeah.
with the amount of turnover that they've seen on their wings in the last 15 years, and they just keep having success year after year after year. They've gone through, they've won Stanley Cups. Like, it's incredible what this team's been able to do, and it starts with that two-headed monster of Crosby and Malkin.
Yeah, Chris Kunitz had some of his best years. Shout out to the Fair State boy when he was playing with Crosby. I did some quick math here, Mike. So far this year, there's been 24 games played by Tristan Jarry of the 31 that the team has played, 24 starts. If he keeps up at this rate with him and Casey DeSmith, because DeSmith's only played 7 games so far, we're going to see over an average, or at least 63 starts from Tristan Jarry this year. So that may be a little bit of a tough workload there for the netminder for the Pittsburgh Penguins. We'll kind of talk about the Penguins a little bit in our next segment when we try to figure out who are the pretenders for the playoffs and who are the contenders to be playing into May and possibly beyond here in our next bit. But guys, I got to ask you, do you got beard like Mike does? Well, you got to get primal. You heard me right. Got beard like Mike? Get primal. Not the official slogan, but we're going to make it happen. If you or someone you care about has a beard, it needs to get primal because maybe you're the guy that's never considered the benefits of treating your beard with product. Primal Origin oils will stop the itch and make your beard look healthy and groomed. The products are free from harmful synthetic ingredients and with low impact on our planet. Primal Origin oils makes balms, oils, and whip butter that are renowned for the best feel and beard products available. All products are fair trade certified and handcrafted in the United States. The combo kits also make a great post-holiday gift. If you're shopping for yourself, you'll be glad you did. We know that every company claims to have the best, but Primal Origin Oils challenges you to compare their ingredients and feel in beard to the other products you've used. We promise you will see and feel the difference. So right now, use the promo code LOCKEDON to get 20% off at primaloriginoils.com. Once again, use the code LOCKEDON for 20% off at checkout at primaloriginoils.com. Pretenders, contenders, Mike. This is always a fun time because people will like to podcast us, because we can't really radio us because we're not on that, but people like to clip this part and tell us that we're wrong come April and May. Looking at the Eastern Conference right now, who is a team right now that you're looking at that's in the hunt right now, or maybe on the bubble in that 4th or 5th spot in their respective division, maybe just outside the wild card picture, that you say to yourself, yeah, that team's a playoff team,
That's on the outside looking in,
or right
now.
around that area, yeah.
Oh, you know what? Like, honestly, I don't know because the way that the playoffs is set up right now, and you look at the way that the wild card is set up, I almost feel like this is going to be like the 8 teams that make it out of the East. You know what I mean? Like, right now, as it sits, you take a look at if the playoffs started today, you have Washington, Carolina, and the Rangers making up the Metro spots. And then you have Tampa, Florida, and Toronto making up the Atlantic spots. And then you have Pittsburgh and Boston making up those wild card spots. I don't see Detroit overtaking one of those guys. I'm not sure I see Philly. I mean, Columbus, I think Columbus has played some great hockey of late. And the fact that they're over 500, I think, is great. But I'm not sold that this is a team that's going to consistently do this down the stretch. So honestly, I'm not sure I see a team at this point who's on the outside looking in, who I think is going to go on a surge here towards the end of the year and get themselves into the playoffs. But if there's a team who is maybe in the playoffs right now that can really take off and become one of the top teams in the East, I kind of circle Boston as a team that I think is interesting. That's in a wild card spot right now, but I think they could be better. They could be a better team, and it looks like they're on the verge of signing Tuukka Rask as well. There's been rumblings of a potential David Krejci reuniting with the team as well at some point before the season's over. So, they bring him back into the fold. They've got lots of games in hand on all these teams. I think that Boston is one of those clubs that is not quite on the outside looking in, but they're right on the cusp in that final wild card spot, who I think deserves to be or could finish a little bit higher in the standings come May.
Do you wonder if Krejci's going to hold out, though, until after the Olympics? Now knowing that the NHL is not
Yeah,
going to go, that
possible.
almost sures a spot for him to go play for the Czechs.
That's very possible. That could definitely be it. And I don't think Boston really cares when he comes back, as long as he gets back here in time to be eligible for the playoffs, which is the day after the trade deadline. I
I
believe
believe
he's
so.
yeah. So as long as he's back by, and that's March 22nd, I think.
Yeah.
So he goes off, comes back, late February, takes him maybe a week or two to get ready. I mean, he's already playing. He's playing overseas. He's training, and he's going to be playing in the Olympics. So it's not like a Tuukka Rask situation where he's coming off an injury and he hasn't played. He's playing. He's in games. So he's
Yeah.
going to be able to come back and get right back into things pretty quickly. So I don't think that's a concern at all for Boston. I could totally see that happening once the Olympics are said and done.
And especially in the playoffs too. I'm not saying that the game slows down to an absolute mush, but the fact of the matter is that it's a much different game come April and May, as we've seen. And then the way the Boston Bruins play it, it works to their style, no question about it. You mentioned Columbus there. You mentioned how they're kind of slacking right now. Well, they had some goaltending issues. Elvis Merzlikins, according to Jeff Sabota, saying that there was some discomfort, did not practice well today. And Daniil Tarasov, who was out of practice today because he left Saturday's game for the Blue Jackets with an injury. That's not good news because they've also had issues with Korpisalo and so forth. By the way, before we get too far, we should probably mention the fact that Austin Matthews had a positive rapid COVID test today. They're going to test him tomorrow, and this is obviously important because the Leafs have a big game coming up on Wednesday against the Edmonton Oilers. That's a big primetime game, and obviously they do not want to be missing him. We'll kind of touch on that story a little bit more when we get to our final segment here. I'm going to go with my pretender right now. I know that it's really tough right now to pull out any of the teams that are in the respective top threes in the Metro or the Atlantic. But if there's a team to have an issue, it seems like it's the New York Rangers, because for some reason I know their offense is starting to come around a little bit, but when Chris Kreider's your leading goal scorer and you have guys like Artemi Panarin and Mika Zibanejad there, I have question marks. It's almost like, this team lives and dies with Igor Shesterkin right now. And similar to the way that Tristan Jarry is with Pittsburgh, if Jarry falters, how will the Penguins play? I look at this in even more of a grand scheme of things, is if Shesterkin starts putting, dare I say, close to league average numbers, I don't know how many games the Rangers win down the stretch here, which could open things up for Pittsburgh to move up there and obviously make the wild card picture interesting. I don't know how many teams in the Metropolitan can, catch up, because looking at the gap between 4th and 5th in this division, Pittsburgh is sitting there at 41 points. There's 32 for Philadelphia. And unfortunately, I love Carter Hart to death. Loved what he did in the World Juniors. Loved him when he was in Everett. Yeah, he's not the savior for Philly right now. So if there's a team right now that's going to say is a pretender in the two divisions, I'm going to go with the Rangers, just because the fact that while they are getting older and a little more experienced with some of the young kids, even with the vets they have there, it just seems like if one piece comes out of this puzzle, it all falls apart, and it looks like this mush of a bunch of random pieces that get tossed into a blender. That's what it feels like for me.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree. If there's one team that's currently up in a playoff spot right now comfortably, who may not be like as sound as a playoff team as the rest, I think I gotta agree. Gotta go with the New York Rangers, and like you said, they're an Igor Shesterkin injury away from this year going very south. You just take a look at natural stat trick, the expected goals for rate, the expected goals for potential or percentage. They're 27th in the NHL. 27th expected goals for rate in the NHL. That's in behind Montreal, behind Seattle, behind Columbus, just ahead of the Ottawa Senators and Buffalo Sabres. Like, that's
And
how
they're kind of down
much
towards
this
the
team
back end.
is struggling to. Yeah, exactly. The biggest thing is you look at expected goals against, and they're right up there in the top. What, they 7th? They allow the 7th most expected goals against. And if it wasn't for Shesterkin, this team would not be anywhere near up at the rankings, up at the top of the standings. I mean, so I think that you're bang on when you say it's the New York Rangers. They're the team who I'd be a little bit worried about if I was a Rangers fan going forward. The fact that, the teams behind them, Pittsburgh, Boston, they've got games in hand, or more so Pittsburgh, I suppose, for the division. They've got a couple games in hand, and they could easily make that up the rest of the way and move the Rangers out into a potential wild card fight.
Yeah, because right now only the Bruins have less goals for among the 8 teams that are in a playoff spot right now in the East. The Rangers just shy of the century mark, which is both behind the Carolina Hurricanes and the Washington Capitals, who, I mean, I'll be honest with you right now. The Capitals are a team that I look at, and I do follow them quite frequently here on the Locked On Network to host Locked On Capitals. But I watch them and I see the fact that they're 0-7 in overtimes, and I'm like, is that going to come back to bite them in this division race with Carolina? Because people are like, oh, they'll make the playoffs. I'm like, sure, they may make the playoffs, but that's the difference between possibly having home ice in the first and second rounds in this division, with the Hurricanes nipping on their heels. And also, by the way, the Hurricanes have 3 games in hand. So it's like, I mean, are the Capitals, I'm asking this even though I said, like, are the Capitals a legit contender to be not just the best team in their division, the best team in the league?
Well, it depends. Like, are they contenders to do that? Like, if they did it, would I be surprised? No, I wouldn't be surprised, but I also wouldn't be surprised if they don't finish as the top team. I think they're one of the top 5 teams in the league. They're certainly in the mix there. I think Carolina's got a good opportunity to, supplant them for the top role, but that doesn't mean that, Washington were pretenders. It just means that Carolina is just as good and maybe a little bit better than Washington. And if you sort by points percentage, Carolina right now actually is leading Washington. They've got a 758 points percentage. Washington is 706. And Carolina with a plus 40 goal differential, Washington a plus 30. So, I think I wouldn't say that Washington are pretenders by any stretch of the imagination. I still think that they're a top 5 club, but I wouldn't be surprised if they don't finish with the division crown either.
My goodness. If that's the weird part too, because they go
I mean,
1-2, I mean,
that says more about how tough their division is than how bad they are.
right. No, and that's what I'm saying is
That's
I
not
think
the right word, but
because I came into this season with Washington saying that this is going to be the team that's going to finish 3rd in this division. But then again, I think a lot of us thought the New York Islanders were going to be a little bit better.
Yep.
Yikes. That UBS arena has got some bad juju in there.
Yeah.
But we'll obviously keep tabs on how it all shapes out. A couple of big games coming up here for the Caps. As for the Hurricanes as well, trying to get caught up with their games.
I checked,
oh, go ahead, Mike.
Really quick. Last I checked, and I'm just quickly going to double check to see how much more goals he scored. But last I checked, Barzal only had like a handful of goals. He's got 6 goals in 25 games. What's going on with Matt Barzal?
We need Gil. We need to have Gil here. Gil's got to answer some questions here because I don't know what it is with them. Like, that's the thing. Like, this team what was the difference? What was the big change? Zdeno Chara? Did Zdeno Chara bring some pessimism from the Capitals into the room or something? Like, I don't know.
They're just not getting any goals, man. Like, this team is not scoring at all. It's actually weird. Their top goal scorer is 10 goals, and there's 2 of them, and that's it. They have the second least amount of goals. They have 64 goals in 28 games. Arizona's got 63. So, yeah, they've got to start trying to find the back of the net somehow, some way.
Yeah, Ilya Sorokin and Semyon Varlamov are looking like Denny Lemieux from Slapshot every single night, like coming in with PT from Shell Shock every single game. My goodness, the way they've had to try to bail their team out. But we'll obviously keep tabs on how it shapes up. Hey, you know what? The Islanders have played a few many games. They could go on this massive St. Louis Blues streak, get the right goaltending, and my goodness, Brock Nelson scores 40 goals somehow. There you go. That's all you need to win in this game, it seems like. Have one big goal scorer. But now let's turn things over, Mike, to what's going on north of the border in your neck of the woods in Canada. Obviously, there was the story going into the pause that there was going to be cut capacity across the board. 50%, I believe it was 50% in Alberta and BC at one point, and then it was going to be just down to 1,000 in Ontario.
Well, there's been changes every week, to be honest.
Well, that was
But
the big release. I remember that, and
the
then
big
we
release,
saw Toronto and Ottawa play in front of no fans.
well, it started technically Toronto Ottawa at 50%, and then it moved to 1,000. And then from there, they basically said, okay, never mind, we're not going to have any fans whatsoever. So now in Ottawa and Toronto in Ontario, they're playing in front of 0 fans. Montreal, they're not even playing. And that realistically, nobody's playing anymore, it looks like. And so out west, you still got 50% capacity in all those buildings. And I'm not sure how much longer that's going to last, to be quite honest with you, just based on what we're seeing happening. It's just been a domino effect all throughout Canada with every province literally since this pandemic started. So, Quebec, they came in, oh, no fans. And then Ontario finally got to that point, no fans. Not going to be shocked if we get out to Manitoba and then out to BC where, numbers start to creep up and they also just decide, okay, let's just play no more fans. And the problem is now we're seeing so many games get postponed. We've had like over 10 games that are supposed to be home games here in Canada, or over a dozen home games that were supposed to be here in the Canadian teams. All the Montreal games, a lot of Toronto, Ottawa games. Then we saw the Western road trip that the Islanders were supposed to make. All those games ended up getting postponed. And then we're hearing there could be even more postponements coming down the pipe here in the next little bit. So it's really an interesting situation up here in Canada where they're trying to just kind of kick the can down the road a little bit. A big reason for it is obviously HRR and hockey related revenues, the amount of money that's lost from not having the gate and the concession stands and that money that's brought in by having people at the games. So they're trying to reschedule these for later in the year when we can open things back up. But at this point, how long can you prolong all of these games? Like at some point, you just got to play.
Yeah, because unfortunately, I've heard a lot over the past weekend that these teams need to play hockey games. If the league wants to get the regular season done by the end of April, before May 1st, teams are gonna have to start playing games, and we're gonna see a lot of 4-game weeks for some of these teams, similar to what the Dallas Stars had to do at the end of their season last year because of all their COVID problems. And there was talks that they were going to postpone the Toronto Ottawa game this past Saturday and also the Toronto Edmonton game on Wednesday. But what I heard was, Mike, you can correct me if you've heard something different here, was that Sportsnet and CBC Hockey Night Canada said, we need you to play this game because this is obviously our marquee matchup. It's a big game, and we need you guys to play this for the TV money, obviously, because obviously they have to pay back all their TV sponsors, and obviously Wednesday night hockey is a big thing as well on Sportsnet. This is kind of it's really a money thing now. Why these teams are if they play any games at all in the least in the foreseeable future, because I should mention Ottawa and Seattle's game, which is supposed to happen in Seattle, is postponed for January 6th, even though Ottawa's going to play Vancouver 2 days later. Should probably put that in there. But what is that what you heard though? Is that kind of how that's kind of going right now? Is like games are being played amongst Canadian teams because, hey, TV money, we need it.
It's somewhat like this all has to do with money at the end of the day, whether you're not playing games because they want to make more money down the road, or they're playing certain games because that will make some money based on TV revenue. Like this at the end of the day, this is all coming down to money. But it looks like Austin Matthews won't even be in this big marquee Wednesday night Leafs Oilers matchup. So the McDavid Matthews battle, not gonna happen. This is not gonna happen because Matthews is most likely going to enter into COVID protocol. He tested positive on a rapid test today, and tomorrow is going to submit to a PCR. More than likely will come back positive because he hadn't gotten COVID in this last wave when everybody else did over the course of the holidays, right before the kind of pause. So it's very conceivable that he now has finally gotten it. I'm sure we'll still see players entering COVID protocol, and he's going to be the next one to probably do it tomorrow. And now that takes a big hit, or it's no longer going to be the Matthews McDavid showdown, but I'm not sure what the right call is, to be honest, because I think if it was up to the teams, I've heard this from a lot of teams now who are starting to have a lot of games postponed. They just want to play. Like, they just want to play these games so that they don't have to condense the schedule later in the season. Like, that's the problem. Now the
Right.
Leafs are going to have, 8, 9 games postponed. The bill comes due at some point, right? And fitting those 8,
Yeah.
9 games, into an already built-in schedule, it's going to be tough. You're going to have a lot more games. You're playing 4 games in 7 nights, 3 games in 5, a couple more back-to-backs, I'm sure, later into the season. So it's really just kind of a mess. And so I know there's a lot of teams that would prefer just to play these games so that you don't have to postpone, push things down the road anymore, and just kind of get this season over with, push through.
Especially since the fact now that the Olympic break was still going to be placed in the schedule. There was going to still be a 3-week break with the fact that there was going to be no Olympics. There would be some games thrown in, and a lot of teams down here in the United States will probably have still, 7, 8, maybe 9 days off, maybe even 2 weeks off for some teams that haven't been hit by the COVID bug as much. But teams in Canada right now, they're going to be playing 2 days after the All-Star game at this rate. Of course, that's implying that we have an all-star game at this rate, because right now down here in the US, Mike, the cares level is dropping further and further and further with these games because they just keep playing. And the only reason why there's no games played is because the team couldn't field enough players to put on the ice. That's the only reason why games are getting postponed right now.
Yeah.
And I don't want to, I don't mean to put you on the spot here, Mike. And I don't mean, and I do my best trying not to get political on this show, on this platform, but why is that why is there such a massive divide between how Canada is treating the COVID protocol and having no fans in the arenas, and whereas the United States, like, hey, you know what? You see that nice little big old crowd we had at Target Field, even though it was -5 degrees, we packed everyone in there because we can. And down in Dallas, it's the same thing and whatnot. Why is there seemingly like this little border that the Blue Water Bridge in Port Huron and Sarnia over there is maybe about a half mile long? Why does it seem like it's a 20-mile difference?
Dude, if I knew the answer, I'm sure I could probably solve a lot of problems that we
Right.
have between the two countries right now. I don't have the answer, and I don't know. And it's frustrating as a Canadian, to be honest with you, to have to watch that Leafs Sens game the other night with no fans, and then flip on to the game against Minnesota and see a full packed house. You know what I mean? Or then on the next day, on the Sunday, watching Sunday football, and you see these fans are just packed full capacity, and it's like, this is the same, like, this is the same sickness, isn't it? This is the same disease that's in both countries. I don't understand why there's such a big difference. And I don't know, man. I don't know the answer to your question, obviously,
Yeah.
why there's such a big discrepancy and difference here, or why these two countries have decided to take two totally different approaches to this thing. All I can tell you is that it is extremely frustrating, I think, on both ends.
Yeah, my wife and her sister and her mother, who all been in nursing, have all experienced the COVID firsthand, been in the hospitals, whatever. I asked them, like, are we ever going to get to that point where, I'm not going to say the word herd immunity, the phrase, but is there ever going to be the point where it's going to be like, hey, you know what, you have COVID, maybe just go home for the day and come back tomorrow? And they're all like, your guess is good as mine. That's how crazy this pandemic has been for. We're hitting 2 years here, Mike, in a month or so, in a couple months. Like it's crazy that we're getting to that point where we still are trying to figure out how to get games played and whatnot. So eventually we'll come back around and we'll all be happy. And speaking of which, my wife's passed me a note. What did you pass me? My wife's going to get Qdoba. Thank you. Can you get me a burrito? Oh yeah, she got me something. All right, cool. Folks at home, get you a wife or a significant other that will get you Qdoba without asking, or get you food without asking. That's what you need. I love you. Thank you. Anyway, sorry about
Need one of them. I need one of them.
We needed something. We needed a good way to try to turn on a positive light here towards the end of this program. But because Mike, that's what we really want. We just want to see hockey. We want to see hockey. We want to be at hockey games. Like, we were expecting to go to Toronto in March or April to go to a Leafs game, and unfortunately, that seems pretty bleak right now.
Yeah, I don't think any much traveling is going to be done as of now. I was supposed to, right now as we speak, I'm supposed to be in the middle of the Caribbean on a cruise, and obviously that didn't happen. That had to get shut down. So unfortunately, travel is very much restricted at this point in time, especially here in Canada. I know in the States a little bit more free, but here in Canada, there's not much that you can really do. We just had they shut everything back down again today in
Oh,
Ontario.
jeez. Yeah,
No gym. I can't go get a haircut. I can't go to the gym. None of that. It's crazy.
it's funny. I remember I had a couple people on my show that were from Ontario during the pandemic, and I'm like, "Hey, you look a lot cleaner since the last time I saw you." And they're like, "Shh, don't say anything."
Yeah,
Can't-
you legit. You're getting people coming and cutting your hair in your kitchen. It was insane.
Oh my gosh! And that was one thing when things were shut down here in Michigan. I'm like, I looked at my wife. She grabbed scissors one day, and I'm like, "Nah, this is just gonna grow. Just gonna let it happen until things open back up again."
Yeah,
She
yeah.
she puts needles in people's arms, saves people's lives. Pair of scissors, though, I run to the other side of the room. That's
Yeah.
But that is it for this Tuesday edition of Locked On NHL. You know, we try to always have it a little bit of a limelight here. Here's the best way to end it positively. Come here. We'll get I like to do this on my show. We'll get the dog involved here. Here's my little corgi Wixie. Hey Wixie. She always likes. I don't know. Sometimes puppies make people feel better, Mike. So I think that's the best way to try it.
Absolutely. So for whoever is just listening to the podcast, now you got to head to YouTube, hit up the Locked On NHL podcast channel on YouTube, and get a glimpse of this beautiful pup.
Oh yes, you'd love her name too, Mike. Her full name is Haley Wickenheiser Kuehl.
Oh my God!
Yes,
unreal.
That's the reason why we named. My wife's like because my dog's names they're gonna be Dougie and Wendell because Dougie Gilmore and Wendell Clark. But we got a girl corgi. And she's like, you know any girl names? I'm like, well, there's Haley Wickenheiser. I'm like, well, Haley's a dumb name. And I'm like, well, what about her hockey name? Wixie. And she's like, it's just like your phone. The ding went off in her head and it worked out perfectly. So that was how we got the name Wixie for Haley Wickenheiser Kuehl. There you go, folks. Best way to end the show here. Make sure you follow the show at Locked On NHL Pods. Be sure to follow Mike Distefano, the host of Locked On Leafs, at Mickey_Canuck. Follow me, the insider of the insiders, Tyler Kuehl, and the host of Locked On Capitals at TJKU29. We'll see you all next time. And thank you once again for listening and watching this episode of Locked On NHL.